Hey, I'm Jake, 22 years old. I grew up in Ohio but recently made the move out west to San Francisco. Right now, I'm in this weird limbo between apartments, scraping by with freelance video editing gigs. Nothing glamorous, but it usually pays the bills if I had rent to pay, that is. Thing is, San Francisco isn't cheap. So until I can find a place that won't drain my wallet, I've been bouncing around, staying wherever I can. That's how I ended up crashing with Tyler, a guy I met through one of my freelance clients. He's a good dude. 23, studies architecture, and plays the guitar like he's auditioning for a rock band, not exactly great, but full of heart. We weren't super tight or anything, more like new friends who clicked fast. When I mentioned I was in between leases, he barely blinked. Told me just crash at my place for a few days. My mom won't care. That's how it all started, just a short stay, nothing serious. That first night felt easy. Tyler introduced me to his mom, Rachel. She didn't look anything like I imagined. Early 40s, maybe? Honestly, she could have passed for mid-30s without much effort. She was lean, confident, and the kind of woman who makes direct eye contact, not in a weird way but in a way that makes you feel like she's really present. She welcomed me like I was someone she already knew. Invited me to dinner, joked I looked too old to be hanging out with her kid. We ate, watched a movie, chatted about my editing gigs. She asked a bunch of questions, but it didn't come off as nosy, more like she was actually interested. That night, I crashed on the couch feeling pretty lucky. It's rare to meet someone's mom and instantly feel that at ease. But the next morning, something felt different. I woke up early, around 7. The house was dead quiet. I shuffled into the kitchen, still groggy, just looking for a glass of water. And there she was. Rachel, by the sink, barefoot, her hair damp like she just stepped out of the shower. She was wearing the smooth navy robe, tied just enough to be proper, but loose enough to stir thoughts I shouldn't have been thinking. It wasn't over the top, not revealing, but it left enough to the imagination to make me feel something. She turned slightly and gave me a soft smile. "Morning," she said, reaching for a coffee mug. "Morning," I replied, trying to fake sounding more awake than I was. And yeah, definitely trying not to let my eyes linger too long. She poured some coffee and leaned back against the counter. "Sleep okay?" she asked. Yeah, I told her. The couch was surprisingly comfy. I opened the fridge, mostly just to give my eyes something else to look at. My heart was thudding in my chest, too loud for how quiet it was. When I peeked back over, she was still watching me. Not in a weird way. Just steady. Like she was trying to figure something out. Then she tilted her head and said it. "Do you always look at me like that?" I froze. Her voice was calm, her lips hinted at a smile, but her eyes weren't joking. She was serious. She didn't laugh. Didn't look away. And my face burned. I hadn't meant to stare. She sipped her coffee, still looking straight at me. Never said it bothered her, just kept that look. I stood there, feeling awkward as hell, not sure what I was supposed to say or do. And then Tyler walked in, yawning. "Yo, coffee?" he muttered, rubbing his eyes. Just like that, the whole vibe broke. Rachel turned back toward the counter like the moment had never happened. "Just made it," she said. I grabbed a glass of water and sat down at the table, pretending like everything was totally normal. But inside, I was buzzing. The rest of the day was chill. Tyler and I hung out, played some games, went for a walk, just talked about random stuff. Rachel acted like it was all business as usual. Friendly, polite, like the night before. But every time I caught a glance, she was already looking at me. And that night, laying on the couch staring at the ceiling, all I could hear in my head was her voice. "Do you always look at me like that?" She wasn't flirting. It wasn't playful. There was something real under her tone, something waiting for a response I never gave. The next morning, Tyler had an early class. He left around 8, tossing his keys on the counter and saying he'd be back around lunchtime. So that left me alone. Well, kind of. I was sitting on the couch with my laptop open, half working on this wedding video for a client in Cleveland, half zoning out on TikTok. My focus was totally shot. All I could think about was the kitchen. Her voice. The look in her eyes when she asked me that question. At about 9:15, I heard someone coming down the stairs. I looked up and there she was. Rachel was wearing tight black leggings and an old sweatshirt. Her hair was up in a messy bun, no makeup. And somehow she looked even better than before. Like, effortlessly beautiful. Natural. "Morning again," she said with a smile. "Morning," I said back. She wandered into the kitchen, poured herself some coffee, and asked if I'd had anything to eat yet. I told her I hadn't. She offered to make some toast and eggs. I didn't really know if I should accept or politely pass, so I just went with sure. We sat at the dining table, just the two of us. The conversation started off pretty light, stuff like my editing work, how long I'd been doing it, if I'd ever thought about making the jump to Hollywood. But then her questions started dipping into more personal waters. Anyone waiting for you back in Ohio? She asked. I chewed a little slower before answering. Used to be. Didn't really pan out. She nodded, a small, knowing kind of nod like she understood. Then she said, you don't seem like the kind of guy someone walks away from that easily. I let out an awkward chuckle. I'm really not that special. She locked eyes with me. I think you are. For a second, neither of us said anything. Just quiet. I looked away first. She let the moment go, smoothly shifting the subject. Asked if I could help her move a few boxes out in the garage. Just old stuff I've been meaning to donate, she said casually. I said sure. 10 minutes later, we were standing in the garage, facing a stack of boxes coated in dust. We didn't rush. It wasn't that the boxes were heavy, the space was just narrow, kind of cramped. Every move meant brushing past one another. Each time we passed, it felt closer than it should. Then she dropped a box, small, filled with books, and bent down to pick it up. Out of instinct, I turned away. But not fast enough to miss the soft curve of her body, the quiet confidence in how she moved. The line of her back, the way she stood, it all kind of stuck with me. When she stood back up, our eyes met again. There it is again, she said in a low voice. Her tone wasn't playful this time. I opened my mouth, ready to say something, anything, but everything I came up with sounded either dumb or way too honest. I'm not judging, she said, stepping just a little closer. I'm just wondering what's going through that head of yours. I don't know if I should answer that, I said, trying to play it off with a crooked smile. She raised an eyebrow. Why not? Because he's my friend. She gave a soft nod. Good answer. Then she reached over, brushed some dust off my shoulder, slow, gentle, and walked right past me toward the door, like it hadn't meant anything. I stayed back, pretending to organize a few books, but my hand was trembling. Tyler came back later that afternoon. He wanted to show me a few design sketches on his laptop. We hung out in the living room for a while. His mom walked by a few times, calm, casual, nothing was said between us. But every time I caught her in my peripheral, she was already watching me. At dinner, something felt off. Or maybe it was just me. She made pasta. The three of us sat down together. Tyler did most of the talking, stuff about school, professors, some design project he was stuck on. Rachel smiled in all the right places, tossed in a few comments here and there, but barely looked my way. Somehow that hit harder than if she had. After dinner, Tyler asked if I wanted to come along to a party a friend was throwing. I told him I had some editing to wrap up. He didn't press, just shrugged and left around 9. I went back to the couch, opened up my laptop, and tried to focus on the wedding footage I was supposed to be working on. About 15 minutes later, Rachel passed through the living room with a glass of red wine in her hand. I'll be in the den if you need anything, she said, her voice light, and kept walking. Thanks, I replied with a small nod. A few more minutes ticked by, then I heard soft jazz playing from somewhere in the back of the house. I kept editing, or at least I tried to. Eventually, I just stopped. Not sure what made me do it. I stood up, wandered slowly toward the hallway, and paused there for a second. Then I started walking toward the den. The door was slightly open. She was curled up on the couch, legs tucked underneath her, flipping through a book. She looked up when she noticed me. Done working? Not really. She tilted her head a little, eyes scanning me. Then what brought you in here? I hesitated for a second. Just needed a break. She set the book down gently on the coffee table. A break from editing, she asked, her voice soft. Or a break from trying not to look at me? My throat went dry in an instant. I had no idea how to answer that. She gave me another gentle smile. Relax, she said. I'm not gonna bite. I let out a nervous laugh. This just wasn't what I expected. Wasn't what I expected either, she replied, almost under her breath. Then she glanced down the hallway and added, in case you're wondering, he'll probably be out for most of the night. I looked at her then, really looked at her. She leaned in slightly and said, just above a whisper, you can sit if you want. So I did. I don't even know how long we stayed there, side by side. 15 minutes? Maybe more. We didn't say much. She kept pretending to focus on her book, and I kept acting like I wasn't aware of how close we were sitting. Every so often our knees would touch just barely, and neither of us pulled away. That smooth, slow jazz played softly in the background. It gave the whole moment a kind of warmth. She took a sip of her wine, then held the glass out toward me. Want some? I hesitated for a second. Sure. She passed it to me without a second thought. I took a small sip and handed it back. Not bad, I said, just trying to keep the quiet from feeling too loud. She smiled. Italian wine pairs best with calm company. I nodded, though my heart was racing louder than any music. I kept stealing glances at her, at how her sweatshirt had slipped slightly off one shoulder, how her lips curled just a little when she caught me looking. It felt like I'd stumbled into someone else's moment. Someone more daring. Someone who didn't second-guess everything. And then, without even turning her head, she asked, "You ever wonder what happens if you cross a line you know you shouldn't?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, I've thought about it." She finally turned to face me. "Think you could live with it after?" I looked straight into her eyes. "I guess it depends on what's waiting on the other side," she asked. She held my gaze like she was reading between the lines, trying to catch whatever I hadn't said out loud. Then she stood up, picked up her wine glass, and said I should get some sleep. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, probably a smart move." She walked toward the doorway, paused for a moment, then glanced back at me. "Good night, Jake." "Good night," I said. She turned and headed upstairs. I stayed there on the couch a while longer, just trying to calm the storm inside me. Eventually, I got up, walked back into the living room, and opened my laptop again. But I didn't touch a thing. I just stared at the blank screen, completely lost in thought. Around midnight, I got up to use the bathroom. As I walked down the hallway, something caught my attention. Her bedroom door wasn't fully closed. It was cracked open just enough for a soft, warm light to spill out onto the floor. I kept walking. But halfway there, I heard it, a quiet whisper. "Jake." Barely audible. I stopped and turned around. She was standing just behind the door, almost hidden in the shadows. The door stayed cracked. She didn't open it wider. "You're still up," she said softly. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. She gave a slow nod. Then her voice dropped, even softer this time. "I've been thinking about earlier." "So have I." We stood there in silence for a beat. Then she said, almost too low to hear, "Come here for a second." I moved slowly toward her, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. When I reached the door, I paused. She opened it just wide enough for me to step inside. The room was dim, lit only by a small lamp next to the bed. She was sitting at the edge of it, legs folded beneath her, wearing an oversized gray t-shirt that hung down to her thighs. No makeup. No act. Just her, unfiltered and close. She held a glass of water in one hand and looked up at me. "I don't usually do things like this," she said quietly. I stayed where I was. "I'm not some bored housewife chasing drama. I'm not trying to mess up your life or mine." "I know," I said. She took a slow, careful breath. She paused, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't remember the last time I really felt seen." She looked down for a second, then back up at me. "And then you showed up, and suddenly it's like I matter again." I took a step closer. "You do matter," I told her. Her eyes shimmered, glossy now. "Don't say that unless you actually mean it." "I do," I said, steady. "I mean it." Then it happened. She reached out, her fingers soft around my wrist, and gently pulled me toward her. Our lips met, slow, unsure, trembling. It wasn't fast. It wasn't about lust. It felt like all the things we'd left unsaid were finally slipping through that kiss. We stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in silence and softness. Then she leaned back just enough to reach behind her and gently closed the door. I followed her lead and did the same. What happened after that felt like a dream playing in slow motion, quiet touches, low voices, long pauses where neither of us could breathe but neither wanted to stop. It wasn't just need. It was something deeper. Something dangerously close to something real. At one point, lying beside her in the dark, I whispered, "What are we even doing?" She didn't hesitate. "Something we'll probably regret." "A beat." "But not tonight," she added. I turned to her. She shook her head slowly. "No, not tonight." I woke up early the next morning. Slipped out of her room quietly, careful not to make a sound. Tyler was still dead asleep, snoring softly in his room. I went outside and walked for a while, hoping it would clear my head. But everything felt heavier. Brighter. Like the world was suddenly more real than it had been just a day ago. When I got back to the house, she was already in the kitchen, flipping pancakes like it was just another morning. "Morning," she said, flashing that same easy smile. "Morning," I replied. Tyler came in right behind me and slapped my shoulder. "Hope you got some rest. Mom's pancakes are a thing of legend." I sat down at the table. Rachel placed a plate in front of me, same as she had before, smiling like nothing had changed. But I knew better. Now I understood that smile. Now it meant something else. Now it belonged to just us. Friday morning crept in quietly. Tyler was flying around the place, tossing things into a duffel for that weekend trip he'd mentioned earlier, Miami, college friends, some beach house thing. Back when he brought it up, I barely paid attention. But now every minute of him packing felt like it carried a strange kind of pressure. "You sure you don't want to come?" he asked, stuffing socks into the corners of his bag. "Plenty of room. Could bring your laptop. Edit poolside." I shook my head. "Got a deadline Monday," I lied. "Can't really afford to fall behind." "Fair enough," he said, zipping the bag closed. Just don't burn the house down while I'm gone. He left a little after noon. Rachel didn't come downstairs. He called out his goodbye from the bottom of the steps, and a few seconds later, the front door clicked shut. The silence that followed felt like it came with its own gravity. Then I heard footsteps, slow, measured, coming down the stairs. I glanced up from the couch. She stepped into view, dressed in loose jeans and a soft tank top, carrying a laundry basket like it was any other day. Like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Is he gone? She asked, her eyes fixed straight ahead. Yeah, I said quietly. She nodded without looking over and walked past me, heading toward the hallway. A moment later, I heard the sink running in the kitchen. I followed the sound. She was standing at the counter, rinsing strawberries under the tap. Want some? She asked, glancing at me from the side. I stepped in a little closer. Do you? She didn't answer right away. Just turned off the water, set the bowl aside, and finally looked at me, really looked at me. Whatever lightness had been there before, it was gone. The air felt thicker now, heavier, charged with something neither of us wanted to name out loud. I didn't sleep much last night, she said, her voice low. Me neither. She dried her hands on a towel and leaned back against the counter. Is this a mistake? I asked. Probably, she said softly. But I'm not ready to stop. I took a slow step toward her, deliberate, no hesitation. She didn't move away. When I got close enough to reach out, she tilted her head up and looked at me. We've only got 2 days, she whispered. That was all it took. We spent the rest of the afternoon inside like two people who knew exactly how little time they had left. No pretending. No second-guessing. No guilt, at least, not yet. She made lunch. I helped. We laughed a little. We kissed in the kitchen, soft at first, then deeper, like we'd been holding back way too long. By the time the sun started to fade, we were curled up on the couch, a movie playing in the background that neither of us really cared about. Her legs were stretched across mine, her head nestled against my chest. Every now and then she'd glance up at me and smile, not saying a word, but somehow saying everything. She never asked me to come to her room that night. She didn't need to. The house stayed still. No jazz, no teasing, no questions hanging in the air. Just the quiet hum of closeness, skin against skin, breath syncing up, a silence that spoke volumes. We whispered under the covers. About her life. About mine. And how something could feel so right and so wrong at the same time. I haven't felt like a woman in a long time, she said softly. I didn't have anything clever to say. I just pulled her closer. The next morning felt like waking up in a moment that shouldn't have existed. Like a dream I wasn't ready to let go of. We had breakfast on the porch. She wore one of my shirts, long, unbuttoned just enough to let the breeze in. To anyone passing by, we'd look like nothing more than two people enjoying a quiet morning. Later, we ran errands. Picked up groceries, a few small things. It felt oddly normal. But in every aisle, every shared glance, there was that same quiet electricity, like we both knew it wasn't forever, but it was real for now. Back home, she put on some old songs she loved and pulled me into a slow dance in the kitchen. We laughed. Hard. Like none of this was complicated. She brought out photo albums from the cabinet. Flipped through pages. Showed me herself as a teenager. Then baby photos of Tyler. And then, suddenly, she got quiet. You look sad, I said. I'm not, she answered gently. Just aware. Of what? That this isn't something we get to keep, she said, barely above a whisper. I know, I replied. My voice wasn't much louder. She reached up and ran her fingers along my cheek, soft and slow. But I wish it could be. That night, we sat outside beneath the string lights Tyler had put up last summer. The air was warm. Still. She rested her head on my shoulder and asked me to tell her stories from when I was a kid. So I did. And she listened, really listened like no one else ever had. Around midnight, she whispered, if things had been different. I nodded. Yeah, I know. And then Sunday came and it hit like a wave. Around 9, Tyler sent her a text, said he and his friends would be back later that day. We both stared at the screen for a long time, not saying a word. Then she stood from the table and quietly said, we should probably clean up. We moved around the house in near silence. She did the laundry. I vacuumed. We passed each other now and then, a glance, the brush of a hand. But no kisses. No late-night whispers. We both knew what was happening. Before Tyler got back, I packed up my things. Told him I'd found a short-term place through Craigslist. Not a total lie, but not the full story either. You sure? He asked. Yeah, I said. Figured it's about time I stopped mooching off your mom. He laughed. I think she liked having you around. I didn't reply. Just as I was about to leave, Rachel met me by the front door. Tyler was upstairs grabbing something. She stepped in close. This isn't goodbye, she said. Sure feels like it, I said. Her throat tightened, and her voice came out soft. You're a good man, Jake. In that moment, I wanted to reach for her, kiss her, hold her, say something that would make this ending feel clean, make it all make sense. But I didn't. I just nodded. Thank you. For all of it. She didn't smile. She just looked at me with those eyes. The kind I knew would stick with me no matter how far I walked. Then Tyler came pounding down the stairs, and just like that, the moment shattered. 3 weeks went by after I moved out. They felt longer than they should have. I ended up renting a room in a shared place, not far from their neighborhood. It wasn't intentional, but it was close enough that I'd sometimes find myself walking down their street, running errands, clearing my head, or at least trying to. I hadn't seen Rachel since that last moment in the hallway. No calls, no texts, nothing. I didn't expect her to reach out, and honestly, I didn't know what I'd even say if she did. So I buried myself in work, editing nonstop, sunrise to night, trying to keep my hands busy so my head wouldn't wander. But it still did. She was everywhere. Certain songs, scents that drifted by too familiar. Even a chipped coffee mug in our kitchen that looked exactly like the one she used every morning. Then one evening, a text popped up from Tyler. Hey man, Mom said you left your charger here. Want to swing by and grab it? I stared at it longer than I should have. Thing was, I didn't even remember leaving a charger. Maybe I had. Or maybe she just needed a reason. Yeah, sure. I can come by tomorrow. He replied. Cool. I've got class till 2. But she'll be home. Of course she would. The next day, I found myself standing on their doorstep again. Heart thudding in my chest like I was about to relive something I wasn't ready for. I knocked. She opened the door. For a split second, she looked caught off guard. Then her face smoothed over. Calm. Steady. Hey, she said. Come in. I stepped inside. The place looked the same. Smelled the same. Like time had just stood still. She walked ahead and picked up a charger from the kitchen counter. This the one? She asked. I nodded. Neither of us said anything right away. But the quiet between us, it spoke volumes. How've you been? She asked gently. All right, I said. Working a lot. She gave me a small, knowing smile. Yeah, Tyler mentioned. I nodded. And you? I've been okay. There was a pause. I glanced down at the charger still in her hand. So, was this really here? Or did you? She met my eyes steady. I didn't want things to end the way they did. I let out a slow breath. Yeah. Me neither. The silence that followed stretched. Not awkward, just full. Then softly she said, I've been thinking. About everything. About those few days. I looked up at her. Do you regret it? She didn't answer right away. Just stood there thinking. Then she said, I regret how much I want to do it again. That hit harder than I expected. But we can't, she added quietly. Not really. I nodded, slow. Yeah, I know. Her voice steadied. It was never meant to last. We were just 2 people who needed something, she said. At the same time. Maybe, I replied. But it wasn't just that. Her expression softened. No, she agreed. But that has to be enough. I stepped a little closer. So this is it? For real? She gave me a gentle smile. Yeah, it is. I reached into my pocket, fingers brushing the edge of a folded piece of paper I'd been carrying. I wrote you something, I said. But I think I'll keep it. Then she surprised me. Not with a kiss, but with a hug. A real one. The kind that wraps around you and says, quietly, thank you for seeing me. I held her close. I hope you find someone who makes you feel the way you deserve to feel, I told her. She leaned back just enough to look at me, eyes a little glassy. You already did, she said. Even if it was only for a little while. I nodded. Goodbye, Rachel. Goodbye, Jake. I turned toward the door, opened it, then glanced back one last time. She stood under the soft kitchen light, arms wrapped around herself like she was holding all the pieces together. I didn't say anything else. Just stepped outside and gently pulled the door shut behind me. And that was it. That night, I lay in bed at my new place, alone, staring at the ceiling, trying not to overthink it all. No big goodbye. No running after each other. No last kiss in the rain. Just a quiet ending. A connection that wasn't built to last. A memory I knew would stay with me longer than it probably should. But maybe that's the thing. Some stories aren't meant to have sequels. And maybe that's exactly what makes them unforgettable.